What is this world that we live in? Well, look no further than the average school advertisement regarding bullying. When we speak of domination and slavery, or many people will say our world is of tyranny, something more relatable to everyday people in the modern world would be the concept of bullies. A bully is someone who dominates or pressures over another, with aggression often on a consistent basis as a means of coercion to get someone to do something. Ask yourself if there are systems in place that are coercing you into doing something, perhaps against your will, dominating and pressuring over you. Well, this bullying concept is related to that of peer pressure, and in the 21st century it makes a common conversation regarding morals among the youth. It is taught so that the student can properly identify what is bullying so that they will know how to avoid and handle it. It is to prevent being bullied or being the bully themselves. Well, are people really understanding the systems that they live in? How to properly avoid it or properly handle it if it is ever getting to the point of domination? We may say that the tyranny in our world is maybe a harder bully to identify, but let us get clearer on what we mean by bullying. Bullying involves an abuse of power, whether it be of a mental or physical expression. It is important to remember that the dominator could be more luring if you are trained to see them not as a bully or you are raised into the condition. Furthermore, we could identify bullies in one area of our life like we do in the schoolroom, but we may fail to identify bullies going by another name, something that we call them something that's not a bully, but in reality, their actions prove that they are a bully. For instance, a slave master in the 1800s is no different from a bully. If you don't know who is the slave master and what is slavery, you may be more likely to be enslaved. We must understand the mental lure used among all these different dominators, whether it's a slave master or a bully or a tyrannical government, seeing the actions for what they are, regardless of who they are or claim to be. It is the action that makes something slavery, abuse, or bullying, for it is the action of giving away your self-ownership or violently imposing your will on another that makes it so. Therefore, if it took action to create, we can equally take action to abolish. Now, some people may say we can take action to change the condition, but perhaps we need to do away with that condition as a whole. If it is inherently bullying or if it's inherently slavery, we wouldn't go to another slave plantation if we are a slave, because then we're still a slave. We would say, no, I'm not a slave at all, I am free. So the most potent strategy against bullies is to walk away if possible or find a way to stand up to them. The goal is to be where a bully becomes someone who cannot bully you or anyone else anymore. Bullies don't need to be bullies, and victims don't need to be victims. In the same way, slave masters don't need to be slave masters, and slaves don't need to be slaves. All these people can heal when the disease is not fed. When the bully becomes devalued in this way, so to promote equality and compassion, they are not any more or less special than their victims to ever dominate over them again. It's all just people among people. In other words, since the dominator depends upon the victim, without the victim, they are reduced to nothing. To reiterate, the best way to prevent bullies is to turn the powerless victim into an empowered individual who exercises their self-ownership, which may also mean utilizing the principle of self-defense. On a societal level, if we're looking at society at large, the people who do wrong are almost always outnumbered, and therefore they have little to no power when many who do right stand for what they know to be right. When treating bullying, the victim is never told to just ask for the bully to be nicer, and it would be absurd for many of the victims to confront the bully in demanding that they are simply bullied less. As if bullying was not already a projection of ego, this acknowledgement or permission only often makes the situation worse and points to a more mental manipulation occurring. We can have compassion, but not if it's being used against us because we tolerate too much. Bullying, like slavery or any form of domination, is something we don't want in our lives at all if we truly claim that we own ourselves. Now, school systems will never teach you this fuller picture of bullying because they only teach you about bullying in the classroom and in the school system. But what about the bullies in your day-to-day life and the systems that act as bullies? What about the slave master and how he is bullying this person who he claims is lesser than him, or claims that, he can dominate simply because he's stronger and that this person that he's making a victim is weaker or less intelligent? The same justifications used for any dominator. Oh, I have more power, might makes right. Is it actually right? And if you understand it is not right for somebody to rule and dominate over you, then why do we create this system that we have called government? If we look in history, all the governments of the past have been based on violence. Every law is backed by violence. And you create an authority in man who has more rights than the average person, who becomes corrupted because they accept that position and everybody looks up to them as that position, and they have the right to do actions which, if we did, it would be wrong. There's a clear contradiction, and there's a clear superstition that we believe that somebody has authority over our own life and that somebody can do wrong and say that it's right, and that we can perceive it as right. Well, it's not actually right if somebody gets to coerce another, control another against their will. And I hope you would agree with that. So let's apply that to everywhere in our life. Just as one would say, it's important to have consent in a relationship. Well, let's apply that to everything in our life. Did you truly consent to the systems that you're under? And are you equal with those who claim to rule over you? Is there any violence in the system that compels you to follow it? Well, if there's violence, if there's authority with certain special rights over you, you are certainly not in an equal and free world, are you? And for more on bullying, I would recommend you check out our video on unhealthy relationships, and the most unhealthy relationship that everybody has within their life that they do not understand, that being these systems of government, religion, and schools. And then also be sure to check out our video on addiction. Because addiction goes on in people's lives, and people are addicted to certain systems and playing the game of politics. It's fun, picking a side, picking a color, and that's all they know what to do. And when people are attached to their healthcare benefits and the stuff that they get from the state for free, there may be an addiction going on, and the longer it goes on, the more painful the withdrawal is, as people find out they're in a tyranny or in a relationship that is really hard to get themselves out of, as dependence has grown. So therefore, for the good of our society, the best course of action may be to release ourselves from our addictions, respect our own individuality, and have healthy boundaries. But if you don't know how to do that and you want to understand more information about this can even help in your personal relationships, down below we'll have linked those extra videos to learn more about this topic. As Aristotle said, the worst thing about slavery is that the slaves eventually get to like it. Larkin Rose, a movie scriptwriter and philosopher and author, says it should be stressed that authority is always in the eye of the beholder. If the one being controlled believes that the one controlling him has the right to do so, then the one being controlled sees the controller as authority. If the one being controlled does not perceive the control to be legitimate, then the controller is not viewed as authority but is seen simply as a bully or a thug. See, there's a moral perception that is perceived among authority figures as opposed to bullies or thugs because they go by another name. From a storybook that he wrote, someone who acts like a slave will be treated like a slave. Someone who acts like a bulldog, well, the best a tyrant can do is kill him. Ayn Rand called it the sanction of the victim. If you give the impression to your oppressor that you accept or even approve of his oppression of you, things will only get worse. Whatever else happens, never tell someone that you accept that he has the right to rule you. Never. You will make him into a monster and you will make yourself into a slave. And a good example we talked about before, psychology experiments, the Stanley Milgram experiment and the Stanford prison experiment, turning men, average people, into monsters. Gustav Landier, a philosopher, says the worker is not a free man entering the market of life and exchanging goods, but that he is a slave whose subsistence must be granted by his master and guaranteed by society. This is this idea of collectivism, right? For the greater good, this must be taken from the individual for everybody else because they need it, right? A justification to violate individual rights. He also says, some enslave and others take away the most basic necessities or leave only the barest necessity or serve the enslaving lords as agents and supervisors. Not from the spirit of revenge, anger, or destructiveness will the new be created. We can indeed create a new world if we understand these concepts. Jeremy Locke says, for all who wish to feed the poor of the world, there is only one solution: end authority. Freedom solves the world's ills. The reason the earth has widespread poverty is simply because people are not free to pursue prosperity. A free people are a prosperous people. And this also goes back to the idea of permaculture, creating abundance everywhere. Abundance defeats scarcity, which is a leading cause of war. So let's do that. Let's end this authority and dependence that we create in other human beings just like us. Let's respect them as simply merely human beings. Nobody has this divine invested right to rule or authority. Everybody has the right to life and freedom to live their own life as they please. Thank you for watching.
They can become a bully in situations later on in life, sadly, or they can become a person who don't believe that they can do anything right.
But he says a child who is a bully may also struggle as he gets older.
There are some people who actually are going to grow into antisocial personality disorder people, who are going to end up in jail some point in their life, who don't care about other people's feelings.
He says most often children who are bullies have experienced abuse.
And they are actually repeating those behaviors with kids that are smaller than them or have any kind of impediment.
You know, a really interesting thing is that bullies are rarely even aware that they're bullies. They won't admit that they're bullies. They blame their behavior on the actions of others. They tend to see the victim of their bullying as the person who brought it upon themselves. So making interventions aimed at self-awareness for bullies really doesn't work because all they're doing is looking at the other person. But sometimes when one is bullied, one feels that their very life and existence is threatened. So when we have something like that happen, just even a single incident, that can be traumatic, and that incident can be burned in the person's brain. That's why it lasts as long as it does. It doesn't go away and can even change the child's self-concept, his own belief about himself. Now, as I said, bullies don't often know that they're bullies, but it can even be much worse than that. There typically is a main bully or a leader, and we see that in movies like Mean Girls. And then we typically see there are followers around the leader, people who will also do what that bully says. So the main bully tends to be the leader, and then you have followers. But things are usually much more insidious than that, because the whirlwind that bully creates is actually followed by people that don't even know the bully, because the bully has respect.
She's the queen bee, the star. Those other two are just her little workers.
Regina George. How do I even begin to explain Regina George? Regina George is flawless.
She has 2 Fendi purses and a silver Lexus.
I hear her hair's insured for $10,000.
I hear she does car commercials in Japan.
Her favorite movie is Varsity Blues.
One time she met John Stamos on a plane.
And he told her she was pretty.
One time she punched me in the face. It was awesome.
And so people will often do what that bully does. We also saw this in the movie Mean Girls when Regina George had the nipples cut out of her sweater, but she put it on and wore it, and then everyone followed suit. But they're even worse than that, because Although there's a leader, there are followers, and then there are people that do the bidding or follow along with that group just because they have respect for it. But also there are people who stand by and do nothing.
Two kinds of evil people. People who do evil stuff and people who see evil stuff being done and don't try to stop it.
In the school system, the people who stand by and do nothing might be teachers, might be administrators, but it's often other kids who see it happening but don't do anything themselves. Now, we often talk about, of course, the bullies having a negative self-esteem. They typically don't see themselves as having a negative self-esteem. They typically see themselves as very powerful. But what's also interesting is that people tend to be less victimized when they have a high self-worth. So the people who the bullies pick on, who might already have a high self-worth, don't tend to suffer the negative psychological consequences that someone else might. Now that's pretty hard to start with, because often people who are bullied are separated from the pack because of some vulnerability. And that may be because their home life isn't good, or they may look a particular way or sound a particular way, something that makes them vulnerable, and then the bully tends to pick on that aspect. You know, often we want to put bullying behind us because it happened in childhood, but we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that bullying continues to happen. Hate crimes are bullying. Sexual harassment is bullying. Discrimination is bullying. And we typically see bullying from sometimes even the highest rungs of the political structure, and that makes bullying somehow permissible. So we all need to do something about this. So right now I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do to help solve bullying in your life. Number 1, come out from the shadows. Admit that you've been bullied. It's really shameful. We all want to put it in the background. We don't want to talk about it. We want to pretend like it never happened to us. But if you can admit it, you're going to face the shame and unshackle yourselves. Number 2, seek support. Find others to talk to about your experience. And if you can talk to someone else who's also been bullied, it's amazing how you'll feel that weight lifted from your shoulders. Number 3, treat the problems that went along with the bullying. Treat the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal thoughts. Treat those troubled relationships, the social awkwardness, the employment issues, all those things that resulted as a fact of our childhood traumas from being bullied. They can be helped. Don't let them weigh you down. And number 4, don't just focus on the negative, but focus on the positive. Build your self-confidence. Building self-confidence can help you. It's like a shield against future bullying. And it will also help you feel better about yourself and your life and about other people as well. And number 5, break the chain. Don't just stand by the sidelines. If you actually see someone being bullied, say something. If you see someone in the political structure bullying someone else, say something. Don't stand by it. Don't hoot and holler when someone else puts down somebody else. Even if you don't like that person, it's not good, it's not cool, and all it does is perpetuate a negative stream. If we can do all these things, we can move the nation forward, we can move ourselves forward, and we can create a better atmosphere for the children of the future.
Thank you for watching this part of the docu-series Slavery Gone for Good. Be sure to watch our other parts for a more deep understanding as to the nature of truth and action in its fullest extent. If you want to learn more and hear more quotes that have not been discussed in this video, be sure to buy the book Slavery Gone for Good Black Book Edition. This is the most important work in history, and you are part of that work. Do not forget it. As Frederick Douglass, former slave and abolitionist, said, "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave."